right, folks. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Mark Levin. Let's keep the ball rolling with another one of our favorites in the Values Voters Summit. She is the founder and president of CURE, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education, which promotes market-based public policy to fight poverty. She had 7 years of firsthand experience in the grip of welfare dependency. Now, as a social policy consultant, she is bringing new energy to policy discussions on how to transition America's poor from government dependency. She consults with Republican legislators on numerous urban issues, has lectured on anti-poverty initiatives on nearly 200 colleges and universities throughout America. She's the author of several best-selling books, including my personal favorite, Uncle Sam's Plantation. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome back to the Values Voters Summit, Star Parker.
Hello. Hey, Patriots. Hey. Oh, you might notice I have my sticker on. Well, because Josh cornered me in the green room. I told him I didn't want to vote. The main reason I didn't want to vote is because he wanted me to do it on my iPhone, and my 2-year-old granddaughter wasn't with me to show me how to use it. But he said he could use his. Then I told him, well, but my candidate is not on your list, and I knew my candidate wasn't on his list. And he said, well, how do you know your candidate is not on my list? I said, because I'm the only one that wants this candidate in the country so far. I said, because I believe, as I said many times, that we're at a critical cross point in this country, similar to in the 1850s, when Abraham Lincoln had to open up the scripture and read from the Lord himself and say that a house divided against itself cannot stand. And he said, we're half slave and half free, and we can't go on like this. We're going to have to make a decision to be one or the other. And I told him, after what we've been through in the last 6 years, we need a healer. We need a reconciler. We need a statesman. So my candidate is Franklin Graham. The psalmist in chapter 36 gives us a clear description of the progressives that have tremendous power in our nation's capital today. The psalmist said that transgression speaks to the wicked deep in their heart. There's no fear of God before his eyes, for he flatters himself in his own eyes that his iniquities cannot be found out and hated. The words of his mouth are trouble and deceit. He has ceased to act wisely and do good. Yep, they are so blind in their own conceit that they cannot see how evil they are, nor can they see the violence they inflict on others. A year ago this past March, the eyes of our nation were riveted on the trial of Kermit Gosnell, the late-term abortionist that ran the House of Horrors in Philadelphia. That was about for 5 minutes. You used to get a 15 minutes of fame, but for 5 minutes now we have the internet. In response to the trial, though, however, some brave members of the United States House of Representatives Judiciary Committee and the House of Representatives Energy and Commerce Committee signed onto letters written to the Departments of Public Health and the Attorney Generals of each and every state in our great union. They were requesting information to examine the oversight of the clinics and facilities that perform abortions in their given states. The letters were pointed and specific. The concern was to find out if other Gosnells, insidious and evil men and women, were running legal abortion mills, the type that the Gosnell grand jury described as a baby charnel house. Abortion mills where women were being maimed and molested and murdered, where full-term babies were being torn apart limb by limb and their body parts flushed down the toilet. This past March, on the anniversary of the Gosnell trial, my organization, CURE, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education, and the National Black Pro-Life Coalition, and ProtectingBlackLife.org, and the National Black Pro-Life Union met with the staffs and several House members and senators to discuss the findings of their letters. We wanted to know if the states responded, and if so, which ones, and what did they say? And we also wanted to know which states didn't bother to respond. Our organizations have been concerned about minority women for years that are being targeted by the abortion lobby. Currently, while black women of childbearing age represent only 7% of the American population, they represent 35% of all abortions. I want to read to you a recap of the trial written by Dr. Day Gardner of the National Black Pro-Life Union. This was submitted, this is what she submitted to these members in addition to the other documents and the statements that each of our groups brought in. The CURE, my group, we brought in documents that showed the sexual recklessness that is happening now in most of our hard-hit communities as a result of the welfare state. Protecting Black Life brought in documentation that Planned Parenthood and other pro-abortionists are deliberately targeting these at-risk communities, with 79% of their clinics within walking distance of our most vulnerable. And then the Black Pro-Life Coalition brought in data that shows that there are a lot of Gosnells. She had names, places, not just of the abortionists, but names of women who have been murdered in these clinics. So I want to read a recap of this trial to remind us, during this election year, a national election year, I know there are many concerns, and I heard Mark Levin's comments, and I saw your response to some of the things he's saying about our national party, or those that would be willing to at least take this on. Some of the members that are our side, our guys, who are trying to get their colleagues to understand that abortion may be legal, but it's not lawful in God's eyes, and we're going to continue to address it. But elections have consequences. And so as we move into this season, I just want to remind you of Thanksgiving dinner. Could be a hard place in your marriage. You might have been sleeping on the couch for a few weeks, but mom-in-law's coming. And we're going to act like we like each other until the day after. Dr. Day Gardner from the National Black Pro-Life Union wrote, on January 19, 2011, Black abortionist Kermit Gosnell, owner and operator of the West Philadelphia Women's Medical Society Abortion Clinic, was charged with 8 counts of murder for killing a 41-year-old mother and 7 newborn babies. For more than 30 years, Kermit Gosnell ran a bloody abortion clinic in a Black neighborhood where he made millions of dollars killing Black children. A year ago, this is Day speak, in New Jersey, Reverend Clenard Childers and she herself and I held a press conference in Philadelphia to call out the media for their refusal to cover the trial. At that point, there was no one in the room. This is before Kirsten Powers went there because of a friend and then exposed to the country what was going on in her article in the USA Today, for those of you that are not familiar with what happened because the media had a blackout. She said, we then stood shoulder to shoulder in a coalition organized by Star Parker and CURE to call immediate attention to the travesty of child killing in Philadelphia, because she had called us and we responded, and by having that press conference here at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. This is Day again. Last year, I cringed and gnashed my teeth while sitting in an almost empty Philadelphia courtroom, hearing testimony after testimony of babies screaming and screeching while being killed by Gosnell and his employees. I heard gruesome testimony by abortion clinic workers about how Gosnell would deliver fully developed, viable children and then turn them over to cut their spinal cords. Gosnell even joked that one baby was big enough to walk to the bus stop. He then cut the little boy's neck and tossed him in a shoebox. It was no big deal to him to kill these children, to slash their necks as they struggled, as they strained, as they cried. If that wasn't grotesque enough, he severed off the tiny feet of several babies and kept them displayed in jars on a shelf as some sort of souvenir. Now, for those of you that don't remember the details of this particular trial, Gosnell had 2 separate rooms, one for blacks and one for whites, and these baby parts were on display in the black room. Gosnell, this is going on with what they wrote for our congressmen to put into their record. Gosnell stored the bodies of children in milk jugs and large soft drink containers and juice bottles. 47 babies were found frozen in the refrigerator freezer, the same freezer his staff kept their lunch in. This is Day. They had to be thawed out like TV dinners so that the coroner could determine their first and last moments of life. Employee Linda Williams actually played with a baby who survived a botched abortion for several minutes and then snipped the baby's neck. Sherry West, a former employee, testified at the Gosnell trial last April, stating that she witnessed a baby screaming, lying on the shelf after having been delivered during an abortion procedure at Gosnell's abortion clinic. In her testimony, she described the baby as being 18 to 24 inches long and one of the largest babies that she had seen delivered there. Her words pierced my heart, Day goes on, as I recalled how happy I was when my son Lawson was born at 19 inches long. Then she heard Elizabeth Hampton, Gosnell's sister-in-law, who had also worked at the abortion clinic. She cried on the witness stand, stating many times that she hated the thought of being jailed. After all, she was only hired to clean the place. I found it maddening that Elizabeth Hampton didn't cry for the babies who were murdered on a daily basis in that house of horrors. She didn't cry for the women that she held down as they wrenched in pain during an abortion procedure. She didn't cry for the women injured there. She cried only for herself. There in the courtroom, among the bloody stained chairs and blood-encrusted procedure table, was a large garbage disposal. Elizabeth Hampton described her job as a cleaning lady, how she would clean out the suction machines by dumping its contents, which included blood and body parts collected from the suction machine into the sink. Obviously, she would then run the disposal. Other workers talked about babies delivered in toilets. One baby used swimming-like motions before being scooped out and killed. Elizabeth Hampton's common-law husband, Jimmy Johnson, took the stand. He worked at the clinic as a plumber and maintenance man. He said the toilets got stuffed up on a regular basis. He testified that on several occasions he had to go outside of the house to clean out the traps that were clogged with baby arms, legs, little hands, and feet. Day said, "I'm a pretty thick-skinned, tough cookie," and she is. Those of you that know her know she's fabulous. But she said the thought of shredded, flushed children was unbearable. I remember thinking, is this America, the beautiful? On May 13, 2013, Kermit Gosnell was sentenced to serve life in prison without parole, convicted of 3 counts of murder. He was convicted of killing three counts of first-degree murder for killing newborn babies in his abortion clinic by cutting their spinal cords with scissors. He was also charged with involuntary manslaughter for the 2009 death of Karna Meyer Mangor, a Nepalese refugee who lived in Virginia with her family. And for those of you that remember, she was refugeed for 30 years in her country. She was here all of 5 months. And discovered she was pregnant, went up through Delaware, and they referred her to Gosnell. And her family barely could even comprehend what was done and why she didn't walk out of there alive. Here's the thing, Gosnell's not an anomaly. Every day, children of every race are being sliced and diced, killed in the most grotesque ways imaginable. We must face the fact that thousands and thousands of children are slaughtered in bloodbaths by the hand of Gosnell-like abortionists. Every day, hundreds of thousands of babies are butchered each and every year by the grace of God. We must not forget. We must do all we can to end the killing. End quote. Where do we go from here? Well, Ezekiel tells us to forge a chain. For the land is full of bloody crime, and the city is full of violence. We want penalties in the Born Alive Infants Protection Act of 2002. And we want whistleblower language in that same act. That act was signed into law by George W. Bush in 2002 because it passed through the Senate with a voice vote where even Hillary Clinton and Harry Reid said, yes, if a baby is born alive, it should not then be killed. We want penalties. Right now, it's just symbolic. We need to keep in mind that absolutely every single picture we had from Gosnell's clinic was taken by a staffer. They need whistleblower language. We need Abby Johnson's ministry to flourish where she's getting one by one out of these abortion clinics. These guys go into the gutter to find their workers. They go into the hardest places in our society. I was talking to a friend, they said, how could it have been so disgusting? Why didn't the girls just get up and get out of there? I said, obviously you haven't been in West Philadelphia in a while, or in some of the hardest places in our society today, where the most broken reside, because that's what the whole community looks like. We hope you will help us get those penalties, because elections have consequences, and we will not get it done if we do not have the right people serving our great country. Matthew 11:12 tells us that from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence, and our great task is to see that everyone is forcefully urged into it. This is right after, actually, when the Lord tells us about the lost. Remember the lost coin, the lost sheep, and the lost person, the prodigal son. This is right in the body where he tells us that we're to preach the good news to the poor, that there's a great miracle in preaching the good news to the poor. We want to force this nation to stop the silence of the innocent. Elections have consequences, and this is a very, very critical election year. Thank you.